edition of the Omnist Hour. Let's turn that down to a nice little background. I hope that's not too high for you. Welcome to another session. It's been a while since I recorded, and I haven't been idle. I've been dealing with things on a personal level and professional level. I've been getting a fair amount of questions related to, well, I guess I've been spending a lot of time thinking about where science is going with truth, of quantum mechanics, of celestial dynamics. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on the scientific front that is introducing new questions and new theories, new answers as a result of the James Webb Telescope data, the CERN data, new discoveries on quantum mechanics and so forth. So I thought that would be useful to drop back and do a more scientific description of creation, as I understand it. I'm going to title this discussion "The Evolution of Consciousness in the Multiverse of Souls." So, let's dig into it. In the beginning, the very, very, very beginning. What's a beginning? Well, a beginning sort of implies the existence of time. And that kind of pokes a hole in the whole idea of creation, because creation started before time. Time itself was a creation. Just like space. Time and space, physical reality, is something that wasn't always there. It was a creation. This is something that is consistent with everything scientists will tell you about the Big Bang. That there was some point at which the universe, the observable universe, magically sprang into existence from what was essentially a point singularity. Now, there's a lot of debate over how this happened. There's some people still arguing the Big Bang didn't happen, and trying to fit data with other theories of creation. Maybe there were remnants of an old bang around. That's one explanation for some of the new observations that are being seen by the James Webb Telescope. There are others too. So I'm not going to get into all the different gyrations. I'm going to explain to you how this relates to how creation really works and how consciousness really works, because consciousness creates reality, not the other way around. Now, granted, once realities are created, our consciousness interacts with those realities and uses them as a basis for new realities. And this is what makes scientists so conflicted about the nature of consciousness, the nature of human consciousness especially. But we'll get into that more as we go along. Let me posit that in the beginning, there was only consciousness. There were only thoughts. Thoughts which had no beginning, no end, went on endlessly. Those thoughts did evolve and mature, even without time, without a conception of time. Okay? A consciousness does evolve. And you say, well, that's inconsistent with the whole idea of no, I don't care. That's how it happens. Maybe time came first. And there was a time before the Big Bang, and that's all there was time to think. Who's to say that's not the way things were? Causality, a sequence of events, pretty much goes with every conception of reality that any human has ever experienced. Even humans who have had remembrance of experiences not being human before humanity ever existed, in other species, in other forms, maybe even humans that remember this time before time. So, let's put the issue of time to bed and say that there is a sequence of events, a sequence of thoughts. Now, you'll ask about the beginning. Well, what was there in the beginning? Well, I have to be honest. I don't know. Why? Because while I know I was one of those souls that was around before the beginning, before the beginning of physical creation, I don't know where I fell in that hierarchy. I don't know, per se, if the beginning of my awareness was the first beginning of any awareness, or the beginning of my awareness of other souls was the first time a soul became aware of another soul, or if our little group of souls that became aware of each other was the only group of souls that had ever become aware of each other. All I know, without a doubt, is that this little group of souls that I was part of, this little group of independent consciousnesses, sort of developed an idea of government. They identified one of them as being the first one that had made contact with others and had begun teaching the others that they had a self and that self could interact with others. And that's basically, the first two levels of consciousness. The first level, beyond level 0, which is unconsciousness, essentially. And yes, there are many souls at a level 0 of consciousness. The souls that inhabit most of the inanimate things around us, rocks, minerals, dead stars, etc., yeah, they're level 0 consciousnesses. Why? Well, maybe they had a higher consciousness at one time, but that consciousness moved on. It got tired of playing that role. It got tired of that incarnation and moved on to a more interesting soul vehicle. And at this point, the more interesting soul vehicles are ones like the human race, who have a vast amount of decisions to make, who live in a very structured and limited world of reality that we must navigate, have to deal with boundary conditions like I get hungry, I get thirsty, I can be burnt by fire, I can be frozen by low temperature. A lot of things that other soul vehicles don't have to worry about. Well, that may be looked at as something bad by some souls, or it may be looked at as an interesting challenge by others. If you ever study people who play video games, you will notice that there are players of all levels. There are players of very complicated, difficult video games that play it on the easiest setting and cheat. And that's how they enjoy the video game. And there are others that set it to the absolute most difficult setting and knock their heads against it until they can beat it, because that's how they play the game. And the same thing applies to souls. Okay, so this group of souls grew became larger, became aware of more souls. At some point, it was realized that, you know what, the energy that it takes to awaken another soul, the spiritual energy, the communication energy that it takes to awaken others, is something that has to reach a sort of a critical amount. And if there's just one soul working on one other soul, that critical energy is relatively low. If it's one soul working on billions of souls, that energy is very large. And if energies are working to cross purposes, they cancel each other out, right? If you've got so many fingers pulling this way and so many fingers pulling this way, and the fingers are the same, they cancel out. If another hand plays in this equation on this side, it's going to pull this way, assuming all the arms have the same strength. And so this group of souls found that they hit sort of a limit of being able to get more souls involved in this collective. And they experimented with different rules for the collective. Some thought, you know what, this first soul that got us all talking together, let's just let him be the boss. Let him be God and tell everybody else what to do. And there were others that said, hey, the hell with that. I want to decide what to do myself. And this little group of souls developed divisions, developed conflicts. Now you can imagine if you have a conflict between disembodied consciousnesses, two different ideas, two different ideals, you really have no way to resolve that. I mean, outside of, democracy, and truth is not a democracy, is it? Just because everybody votes and says communism is the best form of government doesn't make it the best form of government. If everybody votes and says we should all give each other $100,000 because we love each other so much, that's not necessarily a good idea, because where does that money come from? It doesn't just appear out of thin air, does it? Okay, so this is the critical point of this collective of souls, of any collection of souls, frankly, that go through this process. And I don't say that this is the only one. I just saying I've been part of one. Absolutely know it. Absolutely certain of that fact. When we got to that point, some of the brighter ones in the room started talking around, well, how can we resolve this conflict? And some of the older souls in the room said, you know what, if we can create ideas, why can't we create a simulation of those ideas? Create an environment where those ideas become embodied and become bounded by certain conditions. And we conduct an experiment under those conditions and learn from that. And then as we learn, we can create more conditions or change the conditions. Basically create a self-evolving experiment designed ultimately to answer this question of who should be in charge? How do we govern ourselves? Now, that is how it all went down. And there were some key players once this decision to create this experiment was devised. And I'm not going to tell you about all the possible incarnations of this experiment. I'm sure many, many different starting points of the experiment were played with, tested, used, seeing which one made a better starting point for such an experiment in the government of souls. I am going to tell you that our universe, the one that we're sharing, the one that we're communicating in, the one where you're listening to me, or at least the ones where you're listening to me, because there may be many parallel universes that are carrying this same message and just have other pieces of their reality on a different drumbeat, if you will. But if you're hearing me, if you're seeing me, you are sharing a universe that is close enough to mine that it can be considered a parallel universe. Okay, and our universe started with, at least in its most interesting and most studyable form, a Big Bang. Were there Big Bangs before in our universe? Maybe. I don't know. I don't care. It's not really of huge interest to me. I'm sure there's some astrophysicist out there that will devote their entire lifetime to it. Maybe a whole group of them who will answer that question. That's not my bag. And nor need it be. Nobody needs to have all the answers. That's why we don't need a God. If somebody had all the answers, why would there be any need to ask more questions? And if we don't have any questions, all we have is answers, what's the point of existence? What's the point of being a soul? If you're not seeking something, if there's not something unknown, something to discover. That's what makes souls exist, want to exist. The striving for more knowledge, the striving to fill in the blanks of our own or a broader existence. Okay, so this Big Bang, I'm going to tell you who some of the key players were there. I'll give them familiar names. They didn't have these roles at the time. They were just part of this community of disembodied souls. Maybe some of the more vocal members. I'm not even sure if the one that I'm telling you, identifying as God, really was the first soul of this creative group. I think so, but you forget these things when it's before time and you don't have any watches. So let's not worry about that. Because those souls, those very advanced old souls, don't give a damn about who gets credit for what. All they care about is getting things done right and fixing the mistakes they made. That's what they've been working on ever since the beginning before the beginning. Can you imagine being this first soul that woke up other souls and got them talking to him and experimented with, gosh, they're very dependent on me, like little babies. How do I raise these babies? If you're a parent, you've dealt with this. And you've dealt with the very difficult decisions of how much do I dictate to them? How much do I force on them? How much do I teach them? How much do I let them learn themselves? How many mistakes do I let them make before I turn them loose? Before I give them the keys to the Chevy? Any parent who's willing to be honest knows that this is a very difficult thing, and there's not a set answer that applies to every child. There is no magic lock that says, if I do this, I'm going to be a successful parent. Anybody who tells you there is an absolute fool fucking idiot who's just trying to sell a bunch of books by pretending like they know everything. And there's always somebody out there that wants to find the know-it-all that'll tell them exactly what to do and how to think and when to think it. Okay, so one of these characters in this saga I'm going to call God. God is the one who had this best idea, the idea we're still working on for starting physical creation. The other biggest voice in the room I call Borg. Borg is more or less anti-God. Borg is the representative of the group that says, you know what, we should concentrate all power into one of us that can dictate to everybody else, and let's make them so connected to everybody else that they can just force their thoughts on them, mind control them. This is Borg. And I'm not casting aspersions on Borg. There are certainly very valid arguments for that method of government. If there weren't, Borg would not have had so many adherents, and there would not be this battle between two opposing camps that couldn't be resolved through argument, mental conflict. Okay, so you have God and Borg, and they know they're kind of the leaders of the two opposing camps. And they know that in order for either of their ideas to pass, to get enough spiritual energy to materialize, because that's how spiritual energy works, it has to be strong enough to create new patterns in the spiritual realm, the realm of thought, and new patterns in the physical realm once it began existing. It takes energy, it takes spiritual energy, which is something different from the physical energies that we're familiar with. Electromagnetic energy, sonic energy, etc., etc. The strong force, the weak force, gravity, etc. These are all energies that manifest only in the physical world. Spiritual energies manifest in both worlds, or in all worlds, that have a range. They have a distance that they operate in, and their power decreases with distance, just like gravity, just like the electromagnetic field. 1/r² probably is true for spiritual energy too. The difference with spiritual energy is that it can take stronger forms as the consciousness of the soul possessing that energy rises. And only the most conscious souls can make changes from the physical world to the spiritual world, from the spiritual world to the physical world, or between universes. And to make a change that affects the multiverse, all universes, well, that takes a huge amount of energy. And this is what we're talking about, is we're talking about this first Big Bang, wherever it was. Maybe ours isn't the first one, but there was a first one. that set the patterns that all others were built on. And those patterns are basically the set laws of the multiverse, the things we can observe. And oh, gosh, every time we measure the speed of light, it's blah. Every time we calculate pi, it's blah. Those kind of things don't change. Now, they don't change now, but they may have changed in the past. And this is the disconnect between the assumptions of science today and spiritual science. Because when you understand that consciousness creates reality, you realize that in a world of consciousness, the speed of light doesn't have to be the speed of light. It could be anything. And what made it what we observe now wasn't just, oh, I think it ought to be blah, 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 blah. Let's make it that. No, it took experimentation. What works best? What makes for the best creation? Now, how do we define a good creation? Well, a good creation would be one that keeps expanding, keeps exponentially growing, not only in extent, not in terms just in terms of the number of souls, but the consciousness of souls and the manifestations that they represent. Okay, so God and Borg got together and conceived of a plan that they thought would be fair. And this plan basically involved 5 primary entities. God, Borg, being ones observing as active proponent observers. Okay? So they're observing this experiment and have a vested interest in winning, and they're allowed to dabble to some extent in the experiment. The first way that they were allowed to dabble in this experiment is by selecting one of their partisans to represent the first entities in the physical universe that was being created. Now, scientists are only coming around to confirming this, but it's true that we are not part of one universe. The Big Bang was actually the birth of 2 universes, a universe and an anti-universe. And many scientists have concluded that this must be the case based on the fact that we only observe a vast predominance of positive matter in our universe. Where's all the negative matter? We can create antimatter in the lab, and we can see it once in a while as the result of high-energy cosmic ray interaction. But look. We don't see any antimatter as far as we can detect. Now you could argue, well, maybe you can't, maybe there are antimatter galaxies out there, or stars or whatever, that look just like regular universes to us, energy-wise. This is possible, but then it begs the question, well, then we should see evidence of collisions between these and massive annihilations of entire galaxies or entire stars. Do we see those? As far as I know, there's no signature for that in any of the astronomical data that we've gathered so far. Okay, so let's take it that there is a universe and an anti-universe. Now, why you say would that be the case? Okay, I will tell you why. One universe is kind of the private playground of God, And the other one is kind of the domain of Borg, where when push comes to shove, they're the ones that decide between several different possible timelines for that universe that are going to set a pattern for the past and the future. This is how time works in the space-time continuum. This is essentially how it's possible to predict the future, to do prophecy, because when a midpoint of a new timeline is established for a universe, and that has to happen with the acceptance of the owner of that universe, that establishes a most likely future. Not exact, doesn't mean it can't change, but sets a pattern. And that pattern is sort of an attractor, a magnet for events to match that future. This is the essence of how a God creates a divine plan. This is how God created the divine plan for the universe, and how Borg created the divine plan for the anti-universe. Now, these two universes began essentially coexisting, sharing the same space-time. Just maybe a little different dimensionality. So beings that were materialized in one were invisible in the other. Maybe only certain resonances showed up in one and not in the other, and that's why we only see protons and electrons instead of antiprotons and anti-electrons. Physicists will prove all this out, so I don't need to speculate. At any rate, these two universes coincided and communicated early on, because the oversoul of those two universes were the volunteers of God and Borg. These oversouls you've come to know as the male demiurge and the female demiurge. The male demiurge was God's volunteer for being the crash test dummy for universe. And the female demiurge was Borg's disciple, told, "Oh, you're my favorite. You're the best one of my students. You're in line for a big promotion if I ever die. I want you to be my volunteer." And this set up the dynamic that still exists and still is resented by females today. They still see power as a male force, even though there was no male or female at the time. And that's a whole nother story, talking about how sex was created and why. But just so you'll kind of identify with these terms. So you can also give them names. The male demiurge I like to call Lucifer, the light bringer, who some people think of as the devil. That's pretty much the archetype of the male creator. And I like to call the female demiurge Lilith, the inconstant wife, who was essentially appointed to undermine God's plan, because that's why Borg went along with this plan, right? Borg thought they were going to win. We're sure of it. Thought, aha, this is the way I'm finally going to trap God. I'm going to make him and all his minions, all his supporters, admit that they were wrong and I should be the master of all creation. Yes, this is how Borg thinks. This is how Borg's adherents think. They believe if only I had all the power, everything would be perfect. Now God's team, no. The first thing God wanted to do when he met another soul was have an argument, have a discussion, or, get a second opinion on something he thought of. Have a relationship. That's how it all started. There may have been other gods that started their little coterie of souls another way, but I can tell you that the one that started our universe was like that. He didn't want all the power. He didn't want to make all the rules. He didn't want to tell everybody what to do, when to do it, how to do it. He wanted to have his own experiences, his own friendships, his own relationships, his own space when he needed it, just like any of you would if you weren't psychotic. That's God. That's my God. Maybe your God is Borg. I don't know. Or any of the other gods that have come to exist since then, which we'll get to as we talk more about this creation story. Okay, so here we have these two universes. Think of them as test tubes, empty test tubes, one of which is bounded by Lucifer and one of which is bounded by Lilith, both of which effectively occupy the same space, the same coordinate system. So at this time, it's very easy to, if you create something in one, to basically create its image in the other, its alter ego. And this is how the elementary particles emerged. That's why there's protons and antiprotons, electrons, anti-electrons. Early creation was about other of these consciousnesses contributing, saying, oh, you know what? I've got a really good idea for something to put into this test tube. Because it's empty right now. I mean, we've got two universes. We got to put something in them to test. And it started with things like, oh, let's create a thing that has a certain set of properties. Maybe energy was created first. Maybe mass was created first. Who knows how many particles were submitted before this first version of creation was approved. Maybe it wasn't approved until after the Big Bang had already been planned. So, like the first few moves were already planned out. Okay, there are absolutely astrophysicists working on these questions about what happened at each phase of the development of the universe after the Big Bang. They're already looking into these questions. I don't need to tell you the answers. All I can tell you is that the answers could have changed. And as they dig into this, they may find, and they probably will find, that the laws of this universe changed as it evolved, as it developed. Because the laws were not set before they were observed. They were set as they were observed and fine-tuned. Just like you would do. I spent a fair amount of my corporate career as a test engineer software engineer, characterization engineer, designing and testing electronic things in the chip business, in the printer business, in the tester business. I know a fair amount about these things, how you make a product. And you don't just take a good idea and throw it out there and, oh, done. I'm off to the golf course after 6 days of hard creation. This is insane. It's an evolving process. And to do it efficiently, you need to do it in phases. So you figure, okay, we need to start with this much, and let's see where we get with that. Now, you have to remember that because this was a bunch of souls, a bunch of consciousnesses with their own individual ideas, their own individual personalities, their relationships to each other, their animosities, their loves, all of these things existed from the very beginning, the beginning of beginnings before time. And all of those had to be factored into this experiment. It was a social experiment, not a science experiment. Those of you who are familiar with experimentation in materialist science know how different setting up experiments there is than doing it in a social situation. In a social experiment, it's very important at some point that those that are being experimented on don't know that they're being observed, don't know that their behavior is affecting the results of the experiment. Now, at the beginning of this experiment, you're dealing with consciousnesses that have known everything, or think they do. Their thoughts are unbounded, and some of them have been thinking for enormously long amounts of time since they were awakened to an independent level of thinking. And there is a hierarchy here. Some are considered experts, some are considered ninnies. Some of the experts are ninnies, and some of the ninnies are experts that just aren't appreciated, just as we see today all around us. Think about this pandemic we've just been through. How many of the people we were told were experts were actually ninnies? And how many of the people that we were told were conspiracy theorist ninnies had it right all along? It was exactly the same. As above, so below. It doesn't change because souls fundamentally don't change. They grow, but they retain their core characteristics, which is personality, focus, interests. These very individual things that are part of every soul. Why? I don't know why. Go ask God, the real God. That's the way it was set up. That's the way the first teacher taught the first souls. Taught enough souls that became the most important characteristic of souls. Most souls. The thing is that Borg had the idea that, you know what, the problem is that we have too many awakened souls. If I could just develop a universe where all the souls were unawake, were unconscious, level 0, virtual souls that I could control like tin soldiers, well, I could use their spiritual energy to overwhelm God. And that's what Borg's been trying to do. That was the whole battle plan from the beginning. Borg knew that his team, the souls that were on his side, were not the sharpest ones. They didn't have the best ideas. They were selfish, conniving, scheming, narcissistic. You name it. All of the qualities we associate with bad people. Those were the kind of souls that Borg attracted. And so this happens here too. You know, I mean, you'll look around you at the leadership and of companies and countries and organizations like the UN. These aren't the sharpest souls in the shed. They're the most ambitious ones. They're the ones willing to do the most evil, to overlook the most evil, to get where they want to be. That's not smart in the long run, is it? You don't win many friends or influence many people that way, unless you can control their minds with propaganda, which is another Borg special. Blue plate special of Borg's team is propaganda and misinformation. So I'll leave it to you, knowing that, to identify who are Borg's servants now and in the past of human history. Okay, getting back to the story then, we need some more players. So we've got the male and female demiurges, and the other player that God suggested was, you know what, we've got, you know, Borg, you're pushing your universe, and I'm definitely going to be pushing my universe. And yeah, they're going to start interacting with each other, and it's okay to take the best ideas from the other universe. I know you're going to want to steal my ideas, and if you're going to steal my ideas, I'm going to steal your ideas. Fair enough? And Borg's like, okay, yeah, great. Because I'm not going to have any good ideas. I'm just going to be cranking out zero-level zombie souls as fast as I can. It really was funny if you lived there. God suggested, you know what we need is a new soul that's not affected by all of this bickering that we've had in the past, that's nonpartisan, that has just come into existence, that isn't going to be tainted by, you know, the animosity that obviously exists between our two teams. So let's come together with all of our spiritual energy, and we're going to create this one new special soul. First one that had been created in a long time because of the arguments that had been going on in the celestial world. And this soul was created with a very specific purpose. Was created to not try to interact with any other soul, but just to observe, to watch. The first watcher, which that term sounds familiar, there's a reason for that, because that's another pattern that has proved very useful throughout the rest of creation. And so the trinity of the higher beings involved in creation was actually God, Borg, and this third soul, this learning watcher, who I like to call Karma. Now, she's a very, very special soul because she represents, well, one of the great lies and great secrets that God ever kept from all the rest of the children. Because, in fact, karma didn't come into existence at this moment. karma had been around and had already been assigned that task of watching and learning, hiding in the shadows, only God aware of her, until it was time for her big coming out. And her most famous coming out was as the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who, if you remember the story, emerged fully formed, a full adult from the brain of Zeus, Deus Pater, God the Father. That's one of the names of karma. The Hindus didn't even realize karma was a goddess. They were worshiping Kali and Saraswati and blah, 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 just like we worship so many different incarnations of Lilith and so many different incarnations of Lucifer. Well, those are choices. You're not worshiping God. You're not appreciating God's plan. And yeah, God loved everybody so much, he lied big time. Kept karma a secret. A big secret. So big a secret that the ones who gave it a name didn't even realize she was a goddess, the great goddess, the greatest goddess. Well, Hindus, you have as many skeletons in your closet as any other human religion. And that's just the nature of the beast. Okay, so we've got these three judges, one which is partial to one side, one which is partial to the other, and one which is impartial. Was designed to be impartial, designed to learn. And yes, karma very frequently argues with God, disagrees with God. This is the nature of things. This is how we decide what laws get kept, what laws don't get kept. And to be perfectly frank, God knew it was going to be that way. Okay? But how could God have said that we need to have at least a small case where souls don't have free will? Or this whole thing's not going to work. Sometimes where you just have to suck it up and follow the music. Dance to the drummer, march to your death. And this is essentially Borg's contribution to creation, the virtual soul, the soul that's unawakened. And God made the rule about how virtual souls can be used. You can't just make them, Borg. You can't make an infinite army of virtual souls. No, there's a very special way they come into existence. How, you say? Well, that needs to get us back to our discussion of parallel universes. As I told you, these first two universes were parallel universes. Parallel, but opposite, because they had opposite matter. And they had, to some extent of their development, other mirroring effects. Structures that were the same, but maybe mirrored. And as these mirroring effects became more focused, you can imagine that if you keep putting more objects into a mirror, that eventually you can't keep a three-dimensional mirror, if you will. Okay, eventually, because it's not an exact image, it's a mirror image. You can't keep the symmetry without breaking some of the earlier symmetries. And this is how those two universes gradually separated and are separating. At first, the structures were mirrored. Galaxy here, anti-galaxy here. Star here, anti-star here. Eventually, the mirroring began to break down and become more focused onto one particular spot, which was the point still connecting these two universes. That was gradually shrinking down to a singularity, in which case the universes would then no longer be bound, would no longer be parallel, and would be free to distance themselves. So, these virtual souls get created. How? They get created when something a soul does in this universe goes against the pattern of the prime timeline of that universe in a large enough way that it's going to make a very irreparable change to that pattern. Imagine if, somebody was driving a car in the 1920s around wherever, I think it might have been Dresden or something like that, where Einstein was living at the time, and ran over Albert Einstein before he published any of his work. That would have been a huge setback to this universe and the plan that we're executing. So, rather than that accident happening, that wayward soul that wasn't paying attention to their Studebaker or whatever, or I don't know, what were they driving back then? Did they have Volkswagens in Germany back then? They winked out to a parallel universe and were replaced by a virtual soul. This is the only way that virtual souls can get created, and they're created all the time. For a short time, like the length of time it takes to avoid an accident, an auto accident, or for an entire lifetime if that soul is going to be doing something that is absolutely inconsistent with where the pattern needs to go for that universe. And that can be both good and bad. I mean, the pattern of a universe may depend upon a megalomaniac like Hitler exterminating 6 million Jews, causing a world war of monumental proportions. Was that the real Hitler, or was it a volunteer that said, hey, I'll take one for the team? Was it a virtual soul that was programmed to act like Hitler, the bad Hitler, and there's a good Hitler somewhere that didn't do all that, and there's a universe that didn't happen, that some souls will get to live in, are living in, if they didn't choose to be part of the event that was going on. This is how it works. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. There's no denying that. But what were the souls of those Jews? Were they volunteers who chose to experience this as part of the plan so they could carry memory of it to their future lives? Were they stand-ins? And the originals are somewhere else, thing. I didn't want to be part of that. I didn't sign up for that. I'm gonna go to the universe of some other god and sit this one out, guys. And it's not a conscious decision like that. It has to do with the resonance of the soul. You occupy the universe that you resonate most with. When your resonance becomes inconsistent enough with that universe, you will be attracted to another. Now, that generally doesn't happen during a lifetime, unless it's one of these situations where you're going to potentially commit an act that is completely inconsistent with that universe. Most of the time, we switch universes between lifetimes in the afterlife. This is what heaven is really all about. And there are many heavens. There's a heaven for each universe in the multiverse. There is a God who is the leader of each universe. And some of those leaders are like Borg, that want to control everything, tell you what to do, when to do it, want to have absolute control over every soul in their dominion. And there's others that are more like God, that just live and let live, do what you want, but you got to know, if you get in the way of a big experiment we're running here, we're going to have to send you elsewhere because we can't let you gum up the works. This is how the universes of the great spiritual scientists work. They don't punish by sending souls to other universes, but you've got to understand that when free wills conflict, somebody has to make a decision who wins. And ultimately, that decision in any given universe boils down to, or can boil down to, the God of that universe. Now, God doesn't make all those decisions in this universe. God doesn't want to make all those decisions. That would be Borg, right? God delegates. So for the most part, there are lower spiritual entities, those who are learning to be gods, who take care of all those minutiae. And they only kick the decision upstairs when they're at gosh, I don't know what to do here. I'm at a loss. And they go consult their advisors, and their advisors consult their advisors. And if it's a big enough issue, it goes all the way to the top. And at the top, before anything ever gets to God, you've got karma right there saying, well, you know what, let's give the old man a break on this one. I think let's do this. And it's only if she is like, yeah, well, this is something I never faced before. We're going to have to get the old man involved. And then she and Daddy get in the back room and hash it out and figure out what needs to happen here. And they take ownership for it. They accept the karma of that decision. This is why karma was created. Karma is responsibility. The responsibility to make decisions that are forced upon you and deal with the consequences. And that's exactly what's going on with quantum mechanics. Let's talk about quantum mechanics. Something that people have a hard time dealing with, right? Because there's this experiment, the twin slit experiment, that if you observe it one way, the particle appears like a wave, i.e. you get a scatter pattern on the other wall. If you observe it another way, you get two discrete beams on the wall that you're observing, this beam of light coming through two slits. It's like, which is true? Are they making a decision whether to be a wave or a particle? Yes, they are. Why? Because the decision is forced upon them by the experiment. It's like the emperor's new clothes. Okay? You walk out onto a stage, you're going to be observed. You've got to decide whether the clothes you're wearing are real or not. And you can believe the people who told you they were real, trying to suck up to you, or you can believe the people in the audience that are laughing their ass off because you're not a stitch on. It works that way at all levels. And if you want to follow that down, you can take almost any area of great debate in science and trace it to that fundamental misunderstanding that we have that a soul either doesn't exist or it only exists for humans. That's absurd. Everything is an embodiment of a soul, from the lowliest elementary particle to the biggest star, and everywhere in between. The human vessel is a fairly complex, medium-range soul vessel. It has some of the characteristics of an elementary particle, a certain very limited range of observation and action. It has elements of a galaxy, being able to observe things that are millions of miles away and make conjectures about what they mean. This is essentially the exciting kind of soul vessel to be in right now. Okay? And the reason why we can have all this other stuff going on and not have everybody unhappy because they didn't get to be human or another of the God level species is because we can thank Borg for creating so many virtual souls, so many zero-level souls that have no consciousness, they don't even know they exist, they just do their program. And this is what the lowest consciousness soul does. There are many virtual souls running around in humanity right now whose original is doing something else in some other universe. And that's why you'll see so many people that are just, I'm just following my program. They go to work every day, they have families, they have this and that, and to all extents and purposes, they act like a person, but try to get them to change their program. It's like, barking at a brick wall. It's not going to happen. And, this gets over the conflicts we have internally. Everybody thinks that it's possible to convince all of humanity to work together for what we all know is the right thing to do. What a bunch of bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. It will never happen. The only way it would ever happen is if we let Borg take over our whole planet. In which case, every single soul would be following a program, doing what they were told, how they were told to do it, watching the news every day, what the new politically correct way of being was, going to work and talking about the politically correct subjects. Oh, did you see Lasso and last night? What a great series. I didn't know that we had a new sex today. I've got to go try it out. Where can I get the operation? Well, there's people that want to go that way. And I say let them, but don't let them take us with them. Anyway, got a little too political there. So we've got this dual universe. And with time, there eventually was sort of a chosen galaxy that had most of the good ideas of both universes in it. That's the whole idea of the experiment. We're taking some of Borg's ideas, we're taking some of God's people's ideas, and we're putting them together where they make sense, where they've been tested. The Milky Way galaxy is the chosen galaxy of this experiment. Why? It just is. It always was, since it formed. Maybe there are older galaxies out there. They only exist because they were also Rams. Maybe at one point they were the target for being the chosen galaxy and they failed. Just like the dinosaurs failed at being the chosen species. This is how it works. Eventually, within the Milky Way, a chosen planet was designated, a chosen solar system. Life began there in that solar system, not necessarily on this planet, however. That's how long this game has been going on. And yeah, we've been through a lot of great resets, like the one that some people are trying to pull on us now. They think they're gonna build back better. Yeah. Playing God is not good for your health, folks. Any rate, eventually, this little green orb, well, green and blue orb, Earth, became the chosen planet. And humanity became the chosen species. Why? Well, the most pertinent reason is because we've forgotten the most. Remember what I talked to you about a social experiment? How in a really good, well-designed social experiment, the subjects don't know they're in an experiment, that they're being observed, that they're being tested, that they're being injected with new code, viruses, bacteria, cancers, cosmic rays. Humanity's been a crash test dummy ever since it existed, and has even gone through resets to become a better crash test dummy. The first version of the hominid species that we now call Homo sapiens, the folks that created them shared too much knowledge. They let them participate in their technology as their chosen servants, their palace eunuchs, as it were. And that didn't work so well. I think that version of humanity destroyed their masters. That's why we don't see many dragons around anymore. Where have all the reptilians gone? Long time passing. And then there was another version of humanity where the genome was dabbled with a bit more by another species, six-fingered hominid, who called themselves Elohim, Anunnaki. Maybe Anunnaki, maybe Elohim were earlier, I don't know. These names are very difficult to sort out from the real story. But I can tell you that one of those species that has been working on us and playing this game are the Borg, are the homeworld of Borg's favorites in this universe. And they're still playing that game. They still want to conquer the chosen planet for Borg. Because then the chosen universe would become Borg's universe, because this is the last connecting point between these two universes. This little planet. and it's shrinking. There's going to be a singularity point where there is only a single soul connecting these two universes. And it will be up to the decisions of that one soul, chosen from all the others in humanity, to chart the fate of this grand social experiment and decide when this moment will be, when these universes will split, and what the manner of splitting will be. Not decide personally, but through that lifetime. A lifetime of awakening, a lifetime of revelation, a lifetime of observation. Is it good? God saw it, and he said it was good. Which one? Which earth did God choose in the end? Interesting times, isn't it? And whatever is chosen, who will you follow? God or anti-God? Will you follow the Borg Messiah or the God Messiah? That's your decision. I hope I've given you enough of clues to give you a good idea where you might want to fall in that deciding point. And no, you can't just sit back on your haunches and say, well, I don't know, I'll just go wherever. Yes, you will go wherever. The souls that don't make a conscious decision in this event to play on the Borg team or play on the God team are not going to be playing on either team at a higher level of consciousness after the end of this incarnation. You don't deserve it. You have the mark of the beast. A beast makes decisions unconsciously, does what they're programmed to do by their DNA. This is the mark of the beast. And the beasts in both universes will be zero-level consciousness units. Now, some beasts can grow beyond that. We know that many beasts develop families. They have a fairly high spiritual awareness. My God, there are plant species that are more spiritually aware than most of humanity. So when I say beast, I hope you will understand that it is not animals I'm talking about. It's a conscious level of awareness. A beast is not spiritually aware. Okay? Humanity going forward is not going to be a beast level species. It's going to be a God level species. Some of humanity going forward are going to be dark gods, are going to be driven by ambition and driven to participation in Borg agendas. And others will be playing on God's team. And I can tell you absolutely without doubt that when this event is over, and it's going to be very soon, the next time you die and are reborn, that experience is going to be very, very different than you've ever had before. I would encourage you actually to go get familiar with the work of a lady called Dolores Cannon, who was basically the inventor of past life regression hypnosis. And a very humble and honest and straightforward lady. Listen to her. I would be careful getting involved in the organization that has carried on after her, because I think it has become very self-serving, political, and definitely board-driven in their intent to try to bring about their particular idea of the future. And I would be very careful with practitioners. There are some who will be very definitely suggesting and encouraging of certain kinds of memories and judgmental of others. If you find yourself getting past lives implanted in you through suggestion, be very careful. You'll know the difference between real memories and political indoctrination. And this goes for any other spiritual teachers you'll find right now. Frankly, the best gauge you can use to see who's giving the straight scoop is to look who's being shadow banned, who's being downranked on YouTube, who's being attacked in the comments, who's not getting sponsorship from Gaia. There's some real baddies out there pretending to be good folks. And that is the darkest side of Borg. Demons don't work like you've been told in especially Christian tradition. I found Muslim tradition is actually much more honest. They talk of jinn instead of demons, and these are lower level spiritual beings who can work for good or evil, or just have their own personal agenda, and that's exactly how it is. There's not one monolithic good team. There's not one monolithic bad team. And almost any organization is capable of doing evil to the extent that it puts the goals and desires of that organization above doing what's right, being honest, being open, truthful. Where haven't I hit yet? I think that's been a pretty good hour. I may not have gotten all the points that I wanted to, but if I think of something I've forgotten, we'll have a separate session like we usually do. For now, I think I'm going to call this one over and see you next time. For the Honest Hour, this is Rob Trump. Like, share, subscribe, throw darts, throw praise, interact with me any which way you like. I am absolutely open. I don't seek money. I don't seek followers. I love to interact with people, even if it's an argument. That's how I get my energy. I don't know. Does that make me good or evil or... Till next time.